Hey, I can tell this is going to be a good conversation already. Typically, it's very organic flow. I don't ask any gotcha questions. It's more just to educate that next gen and inspire them to try and achieve some of the things that you've done. 8-time Ironman champion, fourth place Ironman World Championships in 2016, 2019, like 7-time Ironman 70.3 champion. I know we were just starting that before we went live here, but maybe tell me about 70.3, how it's unique, how you've been able to win it 7 times. Like, it's pretty incredible. When Danny reached out to get you on the show here, it's like, you got some accolades behind your name, man. Been doing it for 14 plus years. It's pretty impressive. So I'm honored to have you on, Ben, and I look forward to learning more and educating that next generation of athletes with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and I'm happy to share anything and everything I can that might help inspire people, or yeah, just help them navigate kind of their journey in the sport or any sport that they might be doing. I think there's a lot of crossover, and synergies between what I do in triathlon and also other sports out there. I think anytime you run into high achievers in anything, and I'm not like trying to say that I am that exactly, but I've done this for a while, and I think when you find people that have done professional sport and when they've accomplished goals within sport, there's like again a lot of similarities between that and people that are high achievers in business and other things too. So yeah, just stoked to be on here and have a little chat. So yeah, fire away, ask me anything.
Yeah, let's start off. Maybe you talk about the synergies of sport and how what you're doing with triathlon now is probably a testament to what you knew growing up as a kid playing sports. Like, let's start from square one. Like, what was that first sport that you started playing? What got you introduced to triathlon? I know that was when you were exposed to the sport at the University of Montana, but like, let's bring it back, rewind to the early days of Ben Hoffman, and like, how did you come to be this incredible athlete prior to starting up triathlon?
Really didn't do anything well other than probably running, right? Of the three sports, I mean, I didn't have a background in swimming, and I didn't really have much of a background in cycling until I did a little bit of bike touring with my parents when I was in high school. But I think to go all the way back to the beginning, it really just had a lot to do with my upbringing, with my family. I got lucky in the parent lottery, and I had a couple of I have a couple of awesome parents and an awesome sister who is also quite athletic, and we were always outside. I mean, I grew up in Western Colorado in Grand Junction, and we were always outside backpacking, camping, fishing, whatever it was. Riding bikes, yeah, all the stuff, and I feel like we were always on the move, and so that was always built into me where it was like I remember I always well, I don't always. I've told this story before, but I remember that I really wanted to get a video game console, like a Nintendo, one of the old
Mm-hmm.
ones, and my parents were like pretty opposed to that because it just didn't jive with like what they were into and what they probably wanted for me. But eventually they broke down after enough of me asking,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember I got one and I literally played it for a week straight. Like every day after school, I would come, home, and I would just play it for hours. And then literally after 1 week, I was like, I don't ever want to play this again. And like I was done with it. And that didn't mean that I didn't play occasionally with friends, here and there. But like I like realized that that wasn't for me, that I liked being outside, that I liked doing other things that were maybe a little bit more, yeah, active and engaging for me. So yeah, that was kind of my origin in sport. And I think the first sport that I really played seriously was soccer, actually. And I played
Okay.
that all the way through my first couple of years of high school. I played basketball, was pretty into that for a while. Played a bit of golf in high school, actually, which,
Okay.
my dad played a bunch of golf. So I kind of did that for a while in high school. And I've gotten back to it a little bit recently, which has been kind of fun. I do love that game. And then I did get into some bike touring with my parents in high school, and then when I went to college, I got exposed to triathlon. I got into a club team meeting, went and joined the triathlon club team there, and then I began the process of learning how to swim, which I had zero idea about, and that was a huge project and continues to be something that I have to focus on a lot. But yeah, that kind of kicked off my triathlon career, and we were lucky. We had a bunch of really good athletes and a bunch of really good information around us in Missoula at that time. There was kind of a couple of hotbeds. San Diego, Boulder, Colorado, and then Missoula, for whatever reason, was also one of those places where we had a lot of, professionals that were probably in their early 30s that were kind of around the area. David Burkoff, Todd Struckman, Matt Sealy. These guys were racing triathlon at a pretty high level, and they were just kind of around as sort of information for all of us. Plus, we had good coaches, a guy named Chad Latino, and then Jeffrey Sinkowski, Elliot Bassett was my first real coach. And of course we had Lindsey Corbin, who's a professional, and a few other people that also had short professional careers. So there just happened to be all these people in this one area at this one time. And I think that kind of helped set my career in motion because I got a lot of really good information right off the bat. Um, but when I think about, my life in sport and sort of the main lessons, I think back to my parents again, like just the value of hard work, whether you're doing sport or business or whatever it might be. And, I think they really instilled that in me where it wasn't even just like you work hard to like make money or something. It was like you work hard because you're a human being and like we actually need purpose and
Mm.
that, the like hard work is its own reward. And I think that is something that at the time, maybe when I was younger, I didn't really understand, but especially as I've gotten older, I realized that it's like very deeply ingrained in me that, yeah, I need that, I need that in order to feel complete and to feel like I'm enjoying my life, I guess.
For sure. I think that's like, so you put it perfectly, honestly, because a lot of people take it for granted and they think, oh, I want this relaxing lifestyle and I want to just hang out on the beach, drink margaritas and be chilling. And it's like, that's not going to be fulfilling for very long, if at all. And you're not going to be able to develop your skills. You're not going to develop that muscle that is hard work and working towards a goal and achieving that goal and getting that dopamine hit from a long work that's rewarding. You just came off Ironman World Championships in Kona. I know you didn't get the result you want. We were supposed to chat prior to that. You did win Ironman Texas in April. So like, minor slip up recently, but major win before that. Like, tell me about what that's been like. Obviously there's highs, lows in sport, but I feel like you've got some experience having the ability to come back from that. And, you still place well, all things considered. And like, I don't know, maybe just tell me what that feels like, the emotions that went through. There's a lot of hard work that goes into an event like that for a world championship.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that I'm probably still processing them. I would, it's only been a couple of weeks. And yeah, anytime you put a ton of energy and investment into something, then of course it takes, time to process like what, yeah, like you kind of said, I feel like it was a disappointment for me. It didn't really align with, I guess I feel like the work that I did, I didn't really feel like I got the opportunity or gave myself the opportunity to put it on display the way I wanted to. I went into the race really feeling like uh, my main goal actually was just to execute something that would, sort of exhibit the work that I'd been doing. And I didn't care as much about the result. I mean, I'm always wanting to be competitive, and of course, I care about the end result, and winning is amazing. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I think it's more about the satisfaction that comes from knowing that you did your very best effort. Um, and I don't think I really did that. And, as a professional, I hold myself to a really high standard, and I don't blame anyone. I mean, I think I made some mistakes in that race they were kind of rookie mistakes actually. And, yeah, it cost me an opportunity. I didn't really give myself the opportunity to execute a great race. Kind of got in my own way there. So yeah, I feel like still processing it a little bit overall. Um, Compared to my younger self, I mean, I've definitely had disappointing Kona races before. I did my first one in 2009, and I did not go well at all. It went poorly. And I
Okay.
remember it was kind of the end of my season, and I was like really contemplating not coming back in 2010 and racing professionally because I had just quit my part-time job and I was like all in on racing. But then one of the first results I got was like not very good feedback. So I gave myself through the spring of 2010, which turned out pretty well. I came back and got second in an Ironman. Then I won my first Ironman later that year. So, I was, I guess, not lucky, but fortunate to continue going because, that, yeah, has now turned into a 15-year career or whatever in the sport. But point being, I've had those highs and lows and those disappointing moments. And yeah, now it's much easier for me to put it in perspective, I think, especially as a father of two young children, where, I realize that, yes, this stuff is very important. And of course, I always want to perform and to do my very best. But at the end of the day, like sometimes you don't do that. And that is part of the journey. And you certainly learn a lot more, I think, when you have setbacks and failures. And yeah, and there's definitely a lot more growth that happens in that time. So I think what I'm trying to do right now, although it's not always easy, is to take a deep breath and look at this as an opportunity as opposed to
Hmm.
just, oh, I'm going to be depressed and like, lament this fact that I didn't race really to my, to my high standard. But as you said, even within this year, I've had good results and really great results. I mean, things that people dream of doing, like winning an Ironman, winning my 8th Ironman title. And, I'm not a young, spring chicken anymore. So I feel like it's really cool to have won an Ironman in 2010 and then to have done it again in 2022, 12 years later, which, is one of my most proud things I would say is that I have quite a bit of longevity in the sport, and and it's been a pretty successful career overall for most of the time that I've been doing it. So yeah, that's the other thing too, is I guess to kind of take a deep breath and give yourself a moment to maybe reflect on some of the positives as well, and not just get bogged down in the negatives.
Yeah, I think you're being pretty humble. I'd say you've had a pretty incredible career, 15 years to have 8 championships, like a handful of other accolades along the way. Like, I want to touch on the longevity piece because it's really impressive to say the least what you've been able to do. But you mentioned that you had some rookie mistakes. Did I read somewhere that you had like some stomach issues at one point and again later on? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I actually heard this after the fact, and I've had a few messages from people when I posted my post that mentioned that. A lot of other professionals reached out to me and asked like if I thought there was something funky in like some of the aid station, or like whatever, and I was like, well, no, I don't really think that. I mean, I think it was more just the fact that a couple of things. Number one, in the swim, there was a little bit of swell. It wasn't
Mm.
crazy, but typically you get a little bit of swell in Kailua Bay there for the Ironman, world champ swim. And I definitely took on a fair bit of salt water. You just do, like, you're just in that kind of washing machine.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of unavoidable in a way. But and I've had this experience before that you get out of the water and actually your hands, like when you're on the aero bars, they kind of almost are a bit crampy because you've had so much, you've ingested quite a bit of salt, too much, and so the first thing I did was I took on board a fair bit of just water,
Okay.
and that seemed to ease that pretty quickly. So that wasn't really too much of a problem. But I think what I did was I was in a group of guys that was a pretty decent sized pack, and the intensity wasn't super high. I mean, people were kind of marking each other and they were sort of, feeling out like the rhythm of the race a little bit. And during that time, um, you know, my mind goes to put the calories in, get ahead of the game, like make sure that you're staying on top of that. And it was quite easy to do that because it wasn't like that intense. And
Hmm.
but the flip side of that is that when you're not operating at a really high intensity or a relatively high intensity, you're not burning as much of those calories either.
Yeah.
And I think what really the simplest thing was that I just took on too much too quickly, and my gut kind of was like, "Whoa, this is just too much," and so basically after I puked a bit of it back up and struggled for a handful of miles, I switched back to water again, kind of calmed the stomach down, and then I was able to get back in my kind of rhythm later in the bike ride and came around and started to feel good. And then the first part of the marathon was similar. I got going pretty good, went for it a little bit, and then yeah, just kind of struggled in the back of the marathon as well. And I think that was a variety of factors. I mean, my stomach also hurt in the back of the marathon. I had a bit of gas and a bit of pain that way, but it was, I think, also mental at that point where I was kind of like, I'm pretty far out of this, and it's like a bit of a death march, and like I'm not really.
Mm.
You just start to have the questions too of like why you're doing it when your objectives were obviously to perform at a much higher level. And and I have my reasons that I fall back to, which obviously were enough to get me to the finish line. But yeah, I feel like yeah, at that point you're kind of like you're you want to say that you're always fully committed, but I think yeah, it's difficult to battle through some of those yeah, moments where you're like you realize that like the objective is gone,
Yeah.
and
You're in
it becomes more of like a finishing thing as opposed to like yeah, a performance thing. And so yeah, that was definitely the kind of back half of the marathon. But that to me, was yeah, I felt like it was a bit of a rookie mistake because I've done 20 some Ironmans, 25, 28, I don't even know how many. And the first part of my career, it was definitely a learning process. And I think that was sort of excusable. But, lately to do it, to have that kind of mistake, I feel like was maybe, yeah, not something that I'm super, super proud of. But, you know, it's that's kind of the racing thing, right? That like and life in general, really, that there's a lot of lessons that you kind of have to relearn, and you definitely are capable of, making mistakes more than once. And every race is a little bit different too. So I think, yeah, but it was disappointing for sure, because I felt like, even though I didn't maybe have the best training and the highest fitness that I've ever had, I do think that, my intelligence as an athlete has grown through my career, and you can fill in some of those gaps, and my experience obviously as part of that. And I was kind of banking on that, and I felt like I was in a place where I could have had a much better race. I mean, I look at what the finishing kind of results were, and I don't think I would have been in contention for the win this year. But
Mm.
I do think I could have been significantly higher than I was, and um, if I had maybe performed to, my best on the day.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like salt sticks weren't needed after that swim then, eh?
Well, I did end up, yeah, of course, taking it on, because it's still out there. You're sweating so much that, it is a critical piece of it. And I did make sure that I got quite a bit of the chews in on the bike, because yeah, it's amazing how much I go through. And on the bike, it's difficult to tell sometimes because the wind's blowing over you, and even though it's humid, you don't really sense, just how much fluid and how much
Mm.
salt you're actually losing. Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty, I've got that pretty dialed in terms of, calories per hour, the amount of sodium and magnesium and, calcium that I need per hour, as well as the hydration side of it. But I feel like I just didn't execute to the best of my ability on the day, so it was a little bit of a struggle and a little bit of a disappointment.
Hey, like you said, it's an opportunity to recover, right? My colleague Carlos Naranjo, shout out to him, just completed his first Ironman, and he struggled with the swells in the water as well. I think he was on lake. You're obviously on ocean in Hawaii, but that's a tough thing to wrap your head around. Like, you're not swimming in a pool, and I think that's makes a major impact. You talked about calories, nutrition, what you're taking in on a daily basis or on an hourly basis during those races. I'm curious, on like what that pre-event nutrition looks like. Are you throwing back bagels? Like, what are the carbohydrates you're taking down? And then during the event, what are you putting into your body to ensure that you are staying at the peak of your performance levels?
Yeah, so I mean, the kind of typical strategy for me, I mean, just to, you know, back out to like the 30,000 foot view. I mean, on a daily basis at home, my wife is, Kelsey is amazing, and she loves to cook. And I'm really
Clutch.
lucky that way. Yeah, because she's all over it. I mean, our kid, every time I turn around, she's buying a new cookbook, but like I never question it because she actually uses them, and the food she cooks is amazing and it's super healthy. So we eat really well. We eat a really balanced, kind of variety of whole foods. But I mean, and we don't have any major dietary restrictions. Like, I don't avoid dairy, I don't avoid meat, although we don't eat a ton of it. And we definitely target what we consider to be more healthy whole foods, a lot of vegetables, a lot of whole grains, and definitely leaner meats. But basically, a wide variety of really healthy food. But as I get closer to a race, I definitely scale back fiber. And I mean, anytime you're doing a race that's going to be over 4 to 5 hours, that's going to be a factor, especially if you're running in that race.
Yeah.
You really need to factor in that you may have some GI distress and some issues in the later parts of a race like that if you don't scale back some of the fiber in the final few days before it. So I do that. I start to cut back quite a bit. And then on race morning, it's really simple. I just have a little bit of toast, with almond butter, honey, and then some banana as well. And then as I get closer to the race, I'm taking in some sports drink, making sure that I'm kind of keeping the hydration levels up, and then also those, electrolyte levels as well. And then in the race, my nutrition plan consists of basically all liquid nutrition. So I've found that over the years that it's just much easier for my body when it's under, stress like that, when a lot of the blood is moved away from your stomach, to just put in liquid nutrition, because when you have solids, it's just going to be more difficult for your body to break that down,
For sure.
and it's more likely that you'll have some kind of GI distress. So basically what I do is I mix um, a sports drink mixture that's a powder form into almost a gel consistency that gives me the kind of calories that I need. It's a pretty concentrated solution,
Okay.
but what I do is I balance that out by drinking water. So I have basically two bottles, or in my case, I have a hydration system that's inside my bike, and that just has water. And then the bottle has all the calories. And then I get more calories when I'm out on course through the special needs that we have for an Ironman. And then in addition to that, a huge component, of course, is keeping those electrolytes in balance. And so, um, yeah, my partner Salt Stick, they make a couple of different products. They have caps that I take, and then also the chews that I mentioned earlier. And those just make sure that I stay on top of my, electrolytes. I sweat, I would say fairly heavily, but not like off the charts. I mean, you see a lot of people, basically the range is anywhere from about 300 to about 3,000 on the very extreme end of, milligrams of sodium per hour. And I'm
Okay.
right around 800 to 1,000, depending on where I'm at in my training cycle and what kind of environment that I'm in. I do a
Mm.
lot of sauna protocol leading up to hot races so that my body is prepared to hold on to the sodium and potassium and magnesium, calcium, and then sweat more water, which is what you really want. So, you start out with quite a bit more water, like you feel like you're carrying more water, but that's really good actually. Helps you
Hmm.
stay cooler, it helps you sweat earlier and more, and also more water content. But that's kind of my sweat rate is about 800 to 1,000 milligrams per hour. So I'm looking to replace virtually all of that. With salt, you can kind of do that. So yeah, the hydration is key though, because if you're only looking at calories per hour, which people are pushing the threshold of that as well. I mean, you see people now that are taking in 480 to 500 calories per hour, 120 grams of carbohydrate, which it's definitely possible if you train yourself to do that, and it's generally beneficial to have more like that if you can handle it. But you
Okay.
really need to target making sure that you have that dilute enough. So 6 to 10% is what you want for a solution, which is
Okay.
pretty dilute when you think about it. So that means
Yeah.
putting in quite a bit of water, and not just, you never want to just put, if your drink mix doesn't have, or if your calories don't have the electrolyte component in it, you never just want to put in water only like that, because you're just going to flush out all of your electrolyte, and then eventually you're going to be in a bad place. So yeah, knowing what your sweat rate is, knowing what you need that way is pretty critical, and then definitely trying to replace it through some form.
How do you calculate that sweat rate? Like, is it? I'm assuming you're into a lab testing, getting like at least some type of rating from the docs.
Definitely, yeah. So the easiest thing to do, you can do kind of like the more generic tests where you weigh yourself to get, total like
Yeah.
volume loss, but that won't tell you as much about the actual, breakdown of what's in the sweat. So the best thing you can do is get an actual sweat rate test. And they're pretty common nowadays. Like you can find online, you can buy them, or you can go to somebody who's a sports scientist or sports nutritionist, and you can go in, and basically what most of them are is they're kind of like a chemical patch that they stick on your skin, and that
Mm.
chemical forces your skin to start sweating. And there's like a weird spiral tube that collects the sweat in it, and then they're able to analyze the composition of that sweat, and that'll give you an idea of what that kind of breakdown of, again, milligrams of sodium per hour is. And
Okay.
yeah, I would highly recommend it to anybody. It's not a super expensive thing to do, and it can make a massive change in your performance. So
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for the sauna. I spend at least 20 minutes after each of my workouts, ideally in there. I can't stress the benefits enough from it to people. Not always accessible. What does your protocol look like?
I don't do it all year long, but typically I do it for about a 6 to 8 week period leading into big events.
Okay.
And I found that it doesn't really matter whether you're doing a hot race or not. The performance benefits, as you kind of touched on, are like pretty clear cut and scientifically demonstrated. But I do I build from, at the very earliest, 2 to maybe 3 days a week, up to 4 to 5 days a week. Where so I'm in it, most, well, basically every other day or a little more in that final lead up to a hot race like Kona. And I do 30 minutes at about 160 to 180 degrees.
Nice.
So yeah, that's my coach's protocol, that he's basically read enough, and I trust him, and that's sort of what he's put down. And I'm also training in a hot environment as well, so I'm getting that sort of double hit.
Yeah.
But the science is pretty clear that um, that it's really beneficial. Again, whether you're racing in a hot race or not, but especially if you're racing in a hot climate. So it's kind of, they call it the poor man's altitude, right? So yeah, and I found a cheap sauna on Craigslist for like $400 or whatever. So I just put that in my garage, and then I did a few modifications to it to make it even hotter. and more insulated, and it works great. And it's right here at my house, so I don't have to do anything special to go, somewhere to use one.
Yeah.
And it's just my sweat that's in it, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my setup.
That's awesome, and it's so much having it right near you. Inside your garage is ideal. We touched on it earlier. Obviously, these protocols are helping you continue to perform at your peak. The longevity you've had 15 plus years. Is it because of the attention to detail that you put in when you learned at that early age what triathlon needed and what it took to get to that top level? Like, were you applying these things early on, and is this how you've continued to iterate and make progressions? Like, are you cold tubbing it? Like, what else are you doing to make sure that you have this longevity in the sport?
Well, I mean, I would say you think that you have been, right? But then you realize that, like with anything, that the more you dive into things, the more information there is. There's always something to be learning and growing in. So yeah, I feel like throughout my career, I've been pretty, detail oriented, and I feel like that I've made a big effort to kind of, yeah, get the low hanging fruit, and to do the things that, um, yeah, that are maybe that seem like they're a little bit extra or something. There's no question that you have to do the core components. You have to do the basics, right? You have to get those right, like just the training volume um, and staying healthy. But yeah, I mean, I feel like every season I've incorporated more and paid that much more attention, and I kind of have to as I get older too, because my body doesn't recover the same way. And so, yeah, looking at all the different ways through diet, especially through sleep, um,
Hmm.
that's a huge one. And I know right away if I have a bad night of sleep, it's like I'm down like 20% in performance the next day. It's just crazy how much of an impact it makes.
Yeah.
And then,
It,
playing around with all kinds of different things in diet. I mean, for sure, looking at, I've been doing like the beet juice thing forever. That's a really noticeable one in performance for me.
okay.
The ketone esters is another thing that you've seen through cycling that I've been playing around with for a few years now. And um, although I think that one's a little bit less clear cut, I do think there are, some beneficial protocols that can be done that seem to be good. I find that it's more of a recovery thing for me than a performance one.
Okay.
And then of course, yeah, like just really dialing in on the race day nutrition, and you know, um, and then weightlifting has been another one. I didn't always do that in my career, but doing heavy lifting, strength training is massive as well. So yeah, I feel like, and then every tool under the sun. I mean, I get a lot of, I get massage twice a week, and if you, if you saw my little recovery room, I've got every kind of foam roller, ball, Graston scraping tool, like, just everything under the sun. I've got this old thing called a Vitamaster that's like a rolling drum that has little wood slats on it that basically massage your legs. I mean, all the massage guns, the recovery boots, like, it's everything, right? And yeah, I feel like the main thing is though finding the things that work well for you and that you're going to actually use, because a lot of people buy these things and then they don't end up using them or whatever. But yeah, building out kind of building out a system that is sustainable for you. It's something you can actually repeat through time. That's the main thing. It's weird how like you feel like, I mean, it's always been so important to me, and you always feel like but you somehow always feel like you're guilty a little bit, like
Hmm.
being tested, and you're always question, you're like, is there anything in like what I've taken that could potentially like, be a problem? And yeah, so it's kind of it can feel stressful that way, but then I think also through time, the more that you do it, and like the more you realize that like, yeah, if you're not taking like testosterone or like, I don't know, HGH or whatever else, like you're probably not, I mean, I shouldn't say that, knock on wood, but like, yeah, if you're not deliberately cheating with like true performance enhancing drugs, then yeah, it's unlikely. But yeah, I still feel like it's always like a little bit tense, for whatever reason. Like it kind of like puts you on your back foot in a strange way. But I don't know. I mean, we really do like try, our very best. I take a few supplements, like I take a multivitamin and a fish oil and a few other ones, and you're just like, at some point you kind of do, you just sort of like relinquish control in a way, because you're like, I can't go through what's required to like, I mean, with like Salt Stick, they actually test a lot of their product beforehand, which makes them special. They spend the
Yeah.
money, and some companies do that. But not every product, is available in that form. And like at some point, yeah, you're kind of like, and even with that too, like you're sort of just like assuming that what they say is actually, you know, true. But
Yeah. And you have to trust the fact that these companies are hopefully have the best interest of the people that they're providing this product to. But my buddy Denon Maximchuk just posted this, or was reading this article I saw on Instagram. I'll butcher the clip, but it was something like 12 of these 30 sports nutrition companies that were tested actually had incorrect data, didn't
yeah,
have what they listed. It was crazy. I know you wrote an article on it earlier this year, and
right.
we were talking about the fact that I was a doping control officer for a brief moment in time, and had the pleasure of knocking on doors athletes like yourself and saying, hey, we got to test you. But like, it's got to be a weird dynamic for you. You're like, hey, I'm not guilty, I guess I'll do this. But like you said, it's an awkward moment for a couple minutes there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's always in the back of your mind, and I think that kind of like, I would call it like a low level fear, or whatever, is enough to
Yeah.
like help inspire you to. I mean, again, it's not coming from a place of like trying to hide something. It's just like you're nervous that like something out there, because you've heard enough stories, you've seen enough examples, even if a lot of them seem dubious, that people had tainted supplements, they had tainted meat, whatever it was. And so, yeah, you're kind of on high alert, and but that's a good thing. And like, I really am a huge advocate for, doping control testing. And I feel like, there should definitely be even more of it. But I mean, I'm currently on the whereabouts system. So I have to provide, a 60-minute window every single day where they can test me, that I'm responsible for. And that doesn't mean that they're going to come during that window. It means that, that's the one I'm responsible for, but they could come anytime. And I personally am like I've like always believed that if you're a pro athlete, because not everyone's on this system, that you
Hmm.
should be on it. I mean, I know that it comes down to like resources, and it's not that easy to just put every single person on it. But I think that would be one step that would help. But I do, yeah. I mean, it's something that I take very seriously, and my wife and I make sure that we document. I do take a few supplements, and we make sure that we document every single thing. We always keep a handful of the, supplements in the bottle in case there were anything that we needed to have tested after the fact. And it's something that's definitely on our radar and is of extremely high importance to us. So, especially when it comes to somebody like my partner Salt Stick, I do feel like, they've gone the extra step. They've invested in making sure that the athletes can trust the product, and that it's, something that's been vetted ahead of time, because not everything is like that on the market. You don't always know what you're getting.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely something that I think is peace of mind, and definitely helpful in that process, because it's every athlete's worst nightmare to kind of take something unintentionally, and still have it, ruin your career essentially. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's and I mean, I don't know. I guess I try to control what I can, right? I mean, that's sort of my mentality. And
Yeah.
so you do the best to seek out the things that you think um, will help you avoid those issues. And also, you don't spend your whole life, sort of questioning every single athlete out there that has good performances or whatever it is, because that's not actually your job, right? I mean, that's the job of
Hmm.
the anti-doping authorities to pursue these people and to find out whether or not they're breaking the rules. And although it's not always a perfect system, you have to have some faith in it too.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, hopefully resources continue to expand and people who are participating in these events, when it does come down to impacting your livelihood, they should be tested, right? And it should be something that's incorporated. I equated to driving along the highway and seeing the police sirens go on and you having to pull over. You're like, oh, what's speeding, I swear. And then they
Yeah,
fly by you getting someone else. Uh,
exactly.
uh, Ben, I like I said, I'm really appreciating this conversation. Learned a ton so far. I'm curious now. You mentioned before we started recording, you've got 2 kids. You talked about Kelsey, how she's cooking up food for you every day. How do you balance family life with a professional triathlete schedule? Like, you're putting hours in running, swimming, cycling. How do you make time for family and make it a priority in your life?
Well, I do think that, it's tough on one level, because yeah, you're obviously committing a ton of energy physically, especially, and mentally as well. I mean, you're massively invested in your performance, and you're thinking about the details, it's on your mind a lot. It's a very around the clock job, and your recovery when you're not training is a big piece of it as well. So, yeah, it's kind of a full-time job around the clock, but I think, where my mind has gone with regard to all of it now, a couple years into it. I mean, my daughter's 3, my son is 19, almost 20 months. And yeah, I feel like, I just try to draw the energy, from
Mm,
them, which is mainly what it is, because it's a great dose of perspective. I mean, they really just want time with you, and they want, engagement and love. And they know what I'm doing. I mean, go, 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 daddy. Like when I go out for a run, and
yeah.
that stuff is awesome. It lifts me up, and Kelsey will send me a video or whatever sometimes when I'm on a long ride, I just really try to, yeah, do the best that I can to, I guess, focus on my job when I'm out there training. And then when I'm home to really just kind of let go of it, right? Like I maybe don't spend time on my phone looking at Instagram and Strava and whatever everybody else has been doing. It's kind of like, okay, I did my job. I ticked the box for my training for the day. And now I'm home with my family, and it's time to engage with them and draw energy and, hopefully give them some of mine. Um, yeah, it's not always a perfect balance for sure. I feel like it's still, I think a lot of it, the daily, I guess, yeah, sort of time with the kids falls more on my wife's shoulders. But, I also have the benefit of kind of my off season, which I'm, nearly to right now.
Hmm.
And that time is obviously is great for us to be able to just focus on being together. But I do think also, I mean, my job is special in the sense that despite going out for 7 and 8 hour rides sometimes and then being really tired, most of the days I do 3 workouts, and, I have time in between. I'm home. And so
Hmm.
maybe it's not always the most perfect quality time, but I'm actually around a lot, and I get to engage with them a lot. And, I think about people that go into an office maybe, and they're in there for 8 to 9 hours. They're away from home, and then they come home, and it's like the kid goes to bed a couple after hours after they're home. It's like, I feel like I actually do get more time overall with my children, So yeah. But for me, it's really, again, about perspective, where I know what I'm doing is really important. I'm setting, a model for them. And, I'm trying to do my job to the best of my ability and to perform while I can do this job, because it is a very finite career.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I know that they love me regardless of whether I win races or not. And like,
Hmm.
you know, I think that's is really kind of the way I look at it, where it's like super motivating because I want to show them my best. And I also know that in some way it doesn't matter the way that I used to think that it does. So
Yeah, and that's what matters, right? Having their love. That ninth Ironman trophy probably isn't gonna be sitting there in 40 years by your side, checking in on you, making sure you're good. But your kids will be, and I think I've learned from 150 conversations now with athletes. It's the ones that do have parents, they've been integral. The ones that are parents now are trying to replicate what they had from their parents, and I was fortunate as well. I won the parent lottery. I had a bunch of positives that came from that. And it's a testament to what you're able to do today, right? And being able to go out there and still spend that quality time with them. You mentioned off-season plans. I mean, maybe just touch on that before we wrap up here. I'm curious how that looks, timeline, what your workload capacity looks like. And then maybe if you have a crystal ball for Ben Hoffman future, any plans on the horizon for post-career? I know it's not on your mind right now, but anything in the back of your head that you're like, oh, I could definitely take that on or compete or build this brand, whatever it is.
yeah, well, I mean, for starters, I mean, the off season, or half season as we call it, is not too far off, but it's not exactly around the corner, because what I'm doing first is I'm going to what's called Patagonman, and it's a Ironman distance race in the Patagonia region in Chile, southern Chile,
Amazing.
and that is December 4th. And so, yeah, I feel like I can't really, settle into the full on like chill out mode yet, because I definitely need to keep the training ticking over, and the fitness at a high enough level to kind of, execute a decent race down there. It's not a highly competitive race. I think there are a few other professionals that are doing it, but um, it's a super cold fjord swim. You kind of swim from point to point off of a boat that you dive into. The water, it's like 50 some degrees. It's really cold. And then you get out and you ride point to point, kind of in the foothills of of the Andes. And then you run kind of jeep trail, single track, a little bit of road. And it's also point to point. And it's incredibly beautiful and scenic. It can be a little bit chilly because it's like just there springtime, turning to summer.
Okay.
Um, But I've wanted to do this race for a long time, and we just haven't been able to make it work because it's really late in the year, and typically I'm taking a break at this point. So this year we decided to make it happen, and really looking forward to that. So that'll be kind of the last hit out for the year, and then we'll take some downtime. We're planning a little trip to Baja with the family, so we might get down there
Nice.
with my parents. My dad has like a Syncro VW bus that they like to cruise around in, and so they're gonna bring that down, and
Amazing.
we might go down and do some camping and try to get some surfing in, a few things like that, which will be really fun. Um, and then first of the year or thereabouts, it'll kind of be back to work. And my plan is to race another year for sure, and kind of see how that goes. I don't really think that I'll continue to put the focus on Ironman Hawaii. You mentioned I've been second there, I've been fourth there twice. I've had another ninth and then a 10th at Ironman St. George World Champs this year. So I've had a string of really good races and results at the Ironman World Champs, but I think my ambitions for 2023 are probably to shift gears a little bit and to do kind of a different race calendar where I still do some triathlon events and really target, especially probably one Ironman
Mm.
really seriously. But it probably won't be Hawaii. And then I would like to do some of the gravel events that are out there now. That's obviously a big thing that's happening, and has really surged in popularity. And I've done a couple so far, and I've really enjoyed them. So yeah, I'd like to get into that scene a little bit, and see if I enjoy it, see if it's something that resonates with me.
Yeah.
And then yeah, just kind of keep an open mind about what's out there, and what I might want to do within kind of the sporting realm. And then you touched on what I might do after, and it's hard to say. People have asked me this question a lot in my career,
Yeah.
um, and for sure the last year or two I've thought about it more than ever. But my answer's always kind of been the same, which is like, I don't know. And I'm pretty
Mhm.
comfortable saying that because I back myself just like I do in racing, where it's like, I never thought that I would be at this place where I built a career in the sport of triathlon. I mean, I went to college in Missoula, started with the club team there, and then I was like, you know what? I don't want a real job. I want to try this and see if I can make it work. And that was 2006. And here we are,
Crazy.
16 years later. And like, I don't know. I mean, like, I own a home, and like, I have kids, and like I support my family, and we have great relationships with our partners. And I don't know, I just feel like I never would have dreamed that 16 years ago. And it was never my focus. I mean, I wanted to really have fun. It was important to me to build a career and a life out of it. That there was an economic component for sure. But like, yeah, I just feel like I know that I can work hard. I know I can be attentive and like figure out and problem solve, and work in probably a different industry, or do something different. But yeah, it's like you also just don't know who you're going to meet next year. I mean,
Mhm.
it's crazy the relationships that I have that I didn't have a year and a half or 2 years ago. The world went through a global pandemic. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so therefore I feel pretty comfortable saying I don't know. I would like to explore coaching and see if that was a good fit for me, because it's an easy transition where I think I can maintain some of the components of the lifestyle. I can give back a little bit and be engaged still, and also
Mhm.
offer like the information that I've accrued through this career.
For sure.
Um, but yeah, I feel like I'm not sure that that'll be my passion. And so if I'm not really feeling it when I do it, I will not stick with it, just because it's like, something that I can do.
Yeah.
Um, but I have a couple of friends that are entrepreneurs, and people that are pretty high level business guys, and I have a couple things in the works with them. A couple product launches that we're going to do, and probably the next year or two. And I may want to work with somebody that's a partner of mine right now, like a sponsor partner. Maybe do
Yeah.
something with one of them if that's possible, and I feel like it's the right fit. My wife also probably wants to go back to work. Currently, she kind of works for us, and so she,
Okay.
I think, would like to build something for herself again. And so I want to be really open to that, because I do feel like I've kind of steered the ship with my career a little bit over the last 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to make sure that I create a lot of space for her to be able to do what she wants to as well that way. Um, and yeah, I just want to be a dad too. I want to be around and have time with my kids, and um, yeah, get back to some of the things that maybe I neglected, like some skiing, and some backpacking and camping, and things that I've maybe not been doing as much of during this career. So yeah, but the short answer is I don't know. So if you got any great ideas, shoot them my way.
Dude, I love it. I love it. I think more people should be comfortable saying they don't know. And having the audacity to say, hey, I don't have it figured out yet, and I've got ideas percolating, but I don't have one thing I'm going to have a trajectory for. And that's okay for someone who's been doing it for 15 plus years, right? Like you haven't necessarily explored everything that could be out there for you. And I think you're doing a phenomenal job for a kid from Colorado to have gone at the age of early 20s to just propel on a crazy trajectory. It's impressive to say the least. You're a humble individual by not talking about all the things that you do, because it's impressive to say the least. Doing some research, I was had my jaw, had to pick it up off the floor a couple times. But Ben, the way we wrap up every episode on the Athletes Podcast, where our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire the next generation, we ask our guests what their biggest piece of advice would be for that next gen.
That's a really great question. You know, I saw a video clip that was inspiring to me, actually, and it was another athlete who most people in the world are probably familiar with, Eliud Kipchoge, and they were interviewing him. If for the people that don't know, maybe they're listening to this, he is probably the world's best marathoner of all time, and currently, the world record holder at 2:01:09, and did the sub 2 project, which he, was successful in doing. It was a little bit of a, I don't know, it wasn't, I guess, up to everybody's standards in terms of, he had pacers and whatever else, but he broke 2 hours for a marathon, which is basically thought to be impossible. And
yeah,
I've always followed him because I think that beyond being incredibly, like, an incredible individual in terms of his athletic achievements, he's also extremely grounded and seems really intelligent and just kind of dialed in on the mental side of things, which for any athlete or anybody in the world doing anything is so critical. And I remember that they were interviewing him during this video clip, and they were, talking to him in his kind of little, pretty, modest house that he has in Kenya. And they were like, he's like, well, I train and I eat and I read. When I'm not running, I read, and he was, and then he was like, he held up this book and he's like, yeah, this is the book I'm reading right now. And he's like, the main message of it is don't lie to yourself. And I was like, it just kind of like hit me like a ton of bricks, where I was like, it's a really basic thing, but that would be my piece of advice, which I guess is passed on from Eliud Kipchoge. Don't lie to yourself, because I feel like, it's easy to do. But at the end of the day, it's probably the most damaging thing. And, just being true to yourself, listening to what it is that you feel passionate about and then following through on it. Like, never be afraid to do that, because you're going to be so much happier. You're going to have so much more success. Your life is going to be so much more fulfilling and rewarding if you just are honest with yourself and everyone around you. And and then just follow through on those passions, because I don't know, if nothing else, whether you have all the riches in the world or not, you'll have that satisfaction of knowing that you lived true to yourself.
Incredibly wise words from Ben Hoffman. I, again, can't thank you enough for coming on the show, sharing a bit of your story, educating that next gen. Where can people find you on social media so that they can learn how to say they don't know and make sure that they're holding themselves accountable moving forward?
Yeah, so main place that we play around is on Instagram at B Hoffman Racing, and then I have a Facebook page. My wife mostly manages that one. It's also Ben Hoffman Racing. And then I don't do a lot on Twitter actually anymore, but I do have B Hoffman Racing there and pop in every once in a while. So yeah, check me out, follow me there, and feel free to reach out as well. I do the best job I can to respond to people when they reach out with questions or whatever it might be, because I was there at one point in my career, and I'm kind of in the twilight years, I feel like now. So I'm definitely in a position now where I feel like I can offer a little bit more insight and hopefully help that younger generation that's coming up now to be their best and to chase their dreams and goals.
Well, you've done it today, Ben. Again, can't thank you enough. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, folks, for listening to the Athletes Podcast.